Run It Studios is the home of the Run Radio podcast and runradio.net, a podcast and station about the relentless, resilient, and innovative types, inspiring strides in life, business, and beyond. Welcome back to the Run Radio podcast. My name is Chanel Wilcox, and Run Radio is all about talking to people that know a thing or two about resilience and being tenacious. And my guest today certainly knows all about that. I want to welcome Alexia Kate, AK Neilson, to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So again, social media can just be crazy, and sometimes you think it's useless, and then you connect with other inspiring people, and that's how we got connected. And I've been so amazed by your story and your diagnosis, somewhat similar to mine, but you explain exactly what your diagnosis is and what your journey's been like.
Yeah, so I have systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis, previously known as systemic juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, like same thing, different name. It's also called Still's disease, and then in adults, it's called adult onset Still's disease. So it's a lot of words for one disease. It's currently right now understood as a subtype of JIA, which is like a group of autoimmune rheumatic types of arthritis that occur in children. So I got it when I was 12. The main difference between SJA and other types of JA is its systemic features, like hence the name systemic, and the fact that it's a dysfunction of the innate immune system instead of the adaptive immune system.
Oh.
So it's like hallmark feature is like a daily high spiking fever, and it is more likely to cause like inflammation of the internal organs, although the other types can too. It's just less likely and in a different way. So yeah, that's like a basic rundown of it. And of course, arthritis, it affects the joints. And for me, it's primarily affected my larger joints, my ankles and my knees and my hips, and my TMJ. And it's also a little bit in my smaller joints, but not to the same extent.
And
That's
which
my rundown.
yeah, and that's a lot, and that's quite a list. And even to add to the frustration, you're a skier. You use your legs, you use your ankles. So tell me what that was like in all of this.
So my skiing story is pretty long. I grew up in Northern California, and there's a little place called Lake Tahoe on the Sierra Nevadas. That's where I grew up, and I'd been skiing since I was 3, like on ski team since I can remember. And when I was around 9, I started ski racing, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And as a kid, I was not diagnosed with SJA, and I don't think that I had it, although there were like some signs. Like I did have pain. I was like constantly sick. And there's no way to know if that was like little systemic flares or if I was just getting colds all the time, but I was always sick and very rashy. But that's besides the point. It didn't really stop me from being active. And so skiing was a huge part of my life. And I was very competitive in it. My life flipped upside down at 12, when my right ankle, just one day I woke up and it was like big, swollen, would not move. I was also a competitive gymnast at the time, and it was the morning of a big meet. So I was not able to go to that, and thus like began the long journey of trying to figure out A, like what was wrong with me, and B, how to make it better. And because of the hospital system I was in, which is an HMO, it was really hard to get a pediatric specialist. So I was really bouncing around from podiatrist to podiatrist, thinking it was a fracture, like a hairline fracture that wasn't able to be seen on x-ray because the inflammation was there, but there was no break. And it was pretty crazy. So I obviously dropped out of all my sports, dropped out of ski team, which was very heartbreaking for me. It was my whole world, was that. It was a huge part of my identity. So eventually, thanks actually to a dentist who noticed that my jaw was like misaligned. He sent me to an orthodontist thinking I just needed braces. That orthodontist realized that it was not like a teeth issue, but it was a jaw issue. He sent me to a jaw surgeon who then looked at me, looked at my CT images, which she originally thought it was this thing called ICR where the jaw joint disintegrates, but
Oh,
it's not like a systemic autoimmune disease in the way that like RA, SJA, that kind of stuff is. Um, she looked at me, I was in a boot. I don't know if she had like looked at my chart beforehand, but she looked at my mom and she said, "Do you guys have a family history of autoimmune disease?" And my mom said, "Yeah, my mom and my grandma had she had both like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and interstitial lung disease." Um,
oh my
and
God.
she was actually seronegative, which sometimes makes me think that it's possible that they could have mistaken it for Still's disease, but
Yeah.
that's my own personal theory. Um, but so that's when I finally, this is probably about like, I think this was like September or October, no, November. It was November after that whole ski season that I had missed
Yeah.
um, most of it. And then finally I got that diagnosis. And then that's when I was on the journey of, getting, I got surgery on my ankle. I got like procedures and steroid injections. And I immediately started on Emerald and all the stuff.
Yeah.
It was a big year of hospitals for a girl who previously had a phobia. I had a doctor phobia. Uh, yeah, so that was a big, big jump. But eventually we got there, and the next year after my diagnosis, I rejoined ski team after everything had kind of calmed down. I had some damage left in my ankle, so that ankle didn't move
Mhm.
really very well. But I was able to continue competitively skiing through early high school and keep my disease, the like joint damage from the disease, relatively under control. Um, I had like flares here and there, but I was able to keep skiing, not at the same competitive level because of my diagnosis, but I was still able to do it. It wasn't really until my senior year of high school that I had a really big flare that ended up taking all my range of motion in my knees, and well, not all of my knees, like all of the range of motion in my ankles and about the majority of it in my knees. I can like move them this much. Um, and also it was in my hips. And so that's when I had to start looking at other venues to keep skiing.
Is that when
Yeah.
you started using a chair too?
Yeah, so that's when I started needing a wheelchair. I had had a wheelchair before, like for long distances and flares, but it was not like I didn't like need it. So it was a really big change for me to like it. That flare was really big. It started with just a flare in my jaw, and then I couldn't eat because of the flare in my jaw, which then and the surgery to like kind of help with my jaw that I get every couple of years. I couldn't get it for 2 more months, and they couldn't fit me in any time before. Um, and so for those 2 months, I could only do liquids. And so I ended up losing like a very large percentage of my body weight. And I had malnutrition, which they think is like the cause of the really big flare that just spiraled out of control. And so, like, from there, even up, and then going under anesthesia in that state, I think didn't help, although that's just my personal thing. It just kind of kept spiraling. Before, like, my systemic flares were never all that bad. I had like one freshman year that like we didn't realize what it was. We thought I had a chronic infection in my lungs, but actually it was just my immune system being terrible.
Yeah.
And so, but then that year was when it really all like crashed all at once. Like I usually would just, my flares usually are like a fever like one time of the day, like in the late afternoon, evening, my fever will spike and then I'll be good. But that flare, I had like 103, 100-degree 4 fever like every single day. And even on oral prednisone, didn't touch it really at all. So like it was just like IV, and like it was just like ridiculously trying to get it under control. And I was on a TNF inhibitor at the time. I was on like my third TNF inhibitor because I kept trying them and they never stopped the joint damage. They just like slowed it. Like every time I would get an MRI, I'd be like, oh, it's worse. But I guess it probably would have been worse without the meds. Like I
Yeah.
didn't really realize that some people go on meds and it halts the joint damage. Like I just
Yeah.
have. And so all that to say, like I was on a TNF inhibitor. I didn't even know about interleukin inhibitors because I didn't know much about my diagnosis at the time. I mean, I just was like, I have juvenile arthritis. It's whatever. It was like as I was senior year, had that big flare. Was also just switched doctors because I was turning 18, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a hard cutoff, at least in the Kaiser system, that you have to switch at 18. So it was like brand new doctors, and they didn't know what SJA was, and I didn't know that that was even my subtype because it didn't matter when everyone knew. And I wasn't like doing any advocacy work, so I was just like, I have whatever I have. And so it wasn't until like I got a new doctor, a PCP, and she was like, "You have fevers?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Arthritis doesn't cause fevers." And I was like, "It does." And so she actually sent an email to my rheumatologist and was like, "Your patient thinks that she has fevers every day. Like, are you sure?" And my doctor was like, "Yeah, that's actually a part of the diagnostic criteria." But um, anyway, I'm sorry. I was very, very long
No,
story.
it's people need to know this information. Carry on.
Yeah, but basically, it just was like all of these. I like to think it's like just all of these unfortunate circumstances that all happened at the exact same time. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that the stress of college admissions didn't help. The like unfortunate time of the jaw flare, which was kind of a little my fault because I decided I wanted to try to eat a big burrito, which so
Yeah.
it was just like all of these things like combining. The change of the seasons and the fall winter time is always like a flare time for me. So it was during that switching all my doctors. It was late 2021. It was right before 2022, so there was still like the COVID, like had all the what's it called elective surgeries had been on
Yeah.
hold for so long that the
Yeah.
surgery department was like super backed up. And then also I think like just not listening to me where I was like, I'm dying, you guys. Like I literally can't eat and I've lost like so much weight. Like I'm 5'8". I should not be like barely 100 pounds. Like that's
No, it's not
no,
okay.
and they would be like, oh, that's bad. And I'm sorry that you're dealing with that. But they weren't like, at that point, I was like literally begging them, like, if you can't get this surgery soon enough, like, can you like give me nutrients through an IV? Like, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I feel like that's something that you should be able to do. Um, and it was so I just was feeling really abandoned by the system, and then all of that coming together with my biologic that was on at the time, which was kind of working but not really, just wasn't doing anything anymore pretty much. And I was on methotrexate too, but I was on like the top dose of that, so it wasn't even working. And it was just a mess, and so it took a couple of months to get like the systemic stuff under control, and that was like the top priority. um, but during that, I think like a couple months in, like less than a month into that flare, I noticed my knees started getting like red, like the
Yeah.
color red. Like they weren't even swelling it, but they were red. And I was like, oh no.
Oh
Like
no.
I think I've seen this film before. I didn't like that thing. And I was like trying to be optimistic. I was like, I don't know, maybe it's Raynaud's. It's not what
Yeah.
Raynaud's done. But I was like,
Underneath.
and then they started getting swollen and started hurting, and I was like, oh, okay. And it was just kind of like the fog of war. And this again is on me, where skiing is such a huge part of my life that when I finally got the systemic symptoms somewhat under control, and
Yeah.
I wasn't even going to school in person. My school was zooming me in because my fevers were just so crazy. Like I couldn't just go to school.
Yeah.
My school also, I went to like a private Catholic school, so they didn't have elevators. And so I couldn't go anymore.
Oh.
And then took away the mask mandate, and I was on so many steroids and so many, and it was right during the Omicron surge. So my doctor was also like, "That's a terrible idea."
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just like all of these things. So, but I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go skiing because I feel okay. Like I'll go skiing one run a day. And my doctor was like, that's a high impact activity. Doing that on a joint with that much active inflammation is like asking to destroy all your cartilage. And I was like, okay. And then I did it anyway. So that's on me. But it was that like I'm sharing that to explain like how even in that I was could barely doing one run a day. Like I would literally go to the mountain to do one run and potentially, and I know that that probably is the reason that I have the accelerated damage that I have. Not the only reason, but a reason. And I was literally like destroying myself for the rest of the day because like that's how important this sport was to me because for the
Yeah.
longest time after my a diagnosis and the issues in my ankle, I lost every other sport because of the issues in my ankle. I walked with a cane for a long time, which try using a cane in middle school. Oh my God.
Oh, oh,
You know,
yeah.
middle schoolers are
Yeah.
mean, man.
Yeah.
But it was like I couldn't do gymnastics anymore. I like could walk, but it was like with the limp, I couldn't run right. So it was like skiing was this one place where I felt like I got on the mountain and like yeah, I had to adapt it a little because you do use your ankle skiing, but I had my other ankle, I had all my other joints. It felt like the one place where I got on that mountain and I could win against the other kids. Like I was faster than the other kids. And so this was like my one escape this entire
Yes.
time. So
Yes.
I think that was what made it so like even when I was super sick and like objectively was making, the bad freshly 18-year-old decisions that I made to like continue to try to stand up ski in the midst of that. Um it was because that it was truly like the gravity of that sport was like it was who I was. I didn't even know who I was without it.
Yeah.
Um
So many
yeah.
people watching that might think or listening to this may think what you're afraid they're going to think is that, oh, she did that to herself. But what they don't understand is when you have so much out of control in your body, and when you can connect to that one thing that makes you feel like yourself and that you have control over, you have to try to do it. And I get it. So, I mean, I probably would have done the same darn thing. I mean, there are days where I'm like, I should probably rest, but I'm going to go for a run and see what I can do. And because it makes you feel alive and it makes you feel like I know that person there, that I
Yeah,
recognize that person.
exactly. And it's like that one, it's like it's not going to take this from me. And I
Yeah.
felt like it had taken so much. And the
Yeah.
idea that I was going to take like what I thought at the time was who I was. And I still think it's a big part of who I am, like was just like I couldn't do it. And so I skied until the last day I skied was very early in the season. I think it was early February or sometime that year,
Yeah.
2022. And I did a run or two. I actually was, with the team in the gates. I was at this point training with the Masters team, which is a team of 50, 60, 70-year olds who like still want to do the sport but are,
Yeah. Yeah.
70.
Yeah.
And so that was that. I was like, hey guys, I'm in high school, but they let me train with them because it was like
Yeah.
I wasn't capable of training at the level that I wanted to be anymore.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky to do that. But I did a couple runs and it was in a slalom course. And then I attacked it. And by the end of it, my right knee like didn't move at all. Like it just, and you need it to move to turn. So I was just like, I knew in my heart almost, it was like this really weird feeling where I was like, I think that was the last time I'm ever
Oh,
going to do this.
yeah.
And so I left the thing. I didn't ski down the mountain. I went down the gondola because you you need your knee to make a turn. Um, and I went home and I woke up the next day and they were even bigger. And I was
Ah,
like, all
yep.
right. And then it did not get better. And I started needing a wheelchair. And it was like, again, this like still perfect storm where like if it was just my knees, I wouldn't need a
Yeah.
wheelchair. If it was just my ankles, I wouldn't need a wheelchair. If it was just my hips, I wouldn't need a wheelchair. It's like all of them. And it's also like in the what are they called? The midfoot joints, which I
Yeah.
did not know existed until my arthritis started affecting them. I was like, why are there joints in the middle of the foot? What do they even do? Like genuinely.
Yeah, things come out of the woodwork. You're like, oh, well, I didn't know there you go. That
That's a
hurts.
joint?
That can
Yeah,
hurt.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I feel sometimes. I'm like,
Yeah.
that hurts. And my rheumatologist is like, there's a joint right where you just
Yeah.
pointed. I was
Yeah.
like, what?
Great.
You're sure? I don't think so.
So
Um,
what at this point, what is the prognosis that you could go in remission and jump out of the chair and do great here in 6 months, a year? Or is it pretty much like you're where you're at and hang on to what you have now?
um, kind of both.
Yeah.
Um, if I went into remission, I couldn't just jump out because I
Yeah.
have like ankylosis
Yep.
and I have joint contractures, which are partly like the contractures on my knees are also partly because I got COVID, and I was off my meds for so long. And when they were swollen for this, they like stayed in the same position. I couldn't move them because of the swelling. Like I tried to do my like PT, like I tried to do exercise, but you can't like push past that amount of swelling. So they were in the same position for so long that they have contractures. So those can kind of be fixed. The problem is like a lot of the stuff is like surgeries that like then get undone and then you have to like do surgery after
Yeah.
surgery after surgery. So I've I guess in a sense chosen like to live my life and go to college and like just use my wheelchair so I don't have to like do a surgery every like 2 months.
Yeah.
But eventually I can get joint replacements, I
Yes.
think. You just have to wait for the disease activity to calm down. So that's where I'm at. I think ankles don't really, from my understanding, and actually this was from a doctor at arthritis camp, but from my understanding, the ankle replacements are not so good. And they don't really work when like the I don't know, but I don't remember like, but you just get them surgically fused, and they're
Yeah.
already my ankles are just fused, but not right. I guess I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah,
I'm not a
no, and it's so crazy because there are so many advancements in the technology, but it seems like every time I go in there and I'm ready to say, "Yeah, let's fix this," they're like, well." Like
yeah.
for example, like my hands, the options are fuse the finger. We can't really get a joint in there that's going to last you as long as you need,
Mhm.
and it's going to fit. And so I'm like,
Exactly.
I don't want to fuse, but I also don't want to walk around with my hands in the condition they're in. So I feel for you. You don't want it to be replaced. You don't have to go into surgery every 2 years either to fix something again. So it's
Yeah.
a lot of weighing options that we have to do.
Yeah, but so as far as like what I've talked about with my doctors is like it's like it's I don't have to think about it being like forever,
Yeah.
forever, but I do have to think about it as like a long term
Yeah.
thing. But it's not like advancements are being made every day, and it's just kind of this weird like thing where it's like there's this immune system thing that's happening that's like eating and making inflammation and swelling, and that swelling impedes on everything that the orthopedic doctors want to do. And
Yeah.
so they're like in
Yeah.
this like tug of war of like, well, I can't do this until you do this, and they're like, well, this doesn't matter until you do, and it's just like, okay, I'm in the middle of like
Yeah.
these divorced parents. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, my understanding is disease activity dies down, you can replace the joint, and those are getting better. So it's like at some point, like those might last more than 10
Yeah.
years. Um, so that's my, it's very like weird, but then my ankles are just dead. Like
Yeah.
but if you get new hips and new knees, who needs ankles, right? Like, so it's kind of like that's, that's what it is, my understanding. Yeah.
So I know that you've had so much going on and you've done a really good job with not letting it get in your way. You know, you're going
Yeah.
to school, you're juggling, you've even started skiing in a different way. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay.
I skiing is still has my whole heart. A year after, a little bit less than a year after, actually, I started using a wheelchair all the time. My actually my best friend and my partner ended up telling me you need to try again. There's a adaptive sports place called Achieve Tahoe very near me. We knew about it just because it's part of the community. It's something that we've been seeing around. Like you see someone in a sit ski learning, like if you're in Alpine Meadows, like you just see it. And so they were like, you need to try. And I was a little reluctant at first, but I wanted to start skiing again. So I was like, okay. And at that time, I really wanted to do this thing called four tracking, which is basically like forearm crutches with skis on the end.
Hmm.
Um, I can kind of walk with crutches. And so I was like, really, I want this. And so I tried and it didn't work. Which to be fair, the instructors told me like these, you can't put weight on them. Like they're really for people who have like balance issues, like if they have
Oh,
some type of like cerebral palsy, like it's if they are having like neurological balance issues.
okay.
And that was not my issue. And so I tried because I was like, you have to like they look like crutches. I'm gonna try. And I couldn't make a turn because my range of motion when I'm on my knee, like with weight bearing active range of motion, it's like no,
Yeah.
there's like nothing there.
Yeah.
So and you need all that to make a turn. Could not make a turn. I think that was like rock bottom for me. Like
Mm.
I was like, it's done. Like I lost it. Like it's over. And one of the instructors like pulled me aside and was like, I know you said no before, but let me just hear me out for like 1 second. I think that you should try mono skiing, which is this type of sit skiing where you sit over a single alpine ski. And she was saying like, look, this technology, this equipment is so good that it is truly the equalizer. Like even people that can four track and use the outriggers might choose to use the monoski because it's the one thing that like truly gets rid of all the differences and the barriers, and you can ski at an elite level with this. Like you are a competitive skier. I know that that's what you want to return to. Like if you want that, if you really want that, you have to try this. And like it's gonna be a huge reset and it's gonna be hard, but like if you really want it, like that's what you should do. And so that day after that lesson, it was pouring rain too, which rain and cold did not
Ugh.
help. Yeah.
Not
So
anybody
I
with an auto.
yeah, no, it was just like a perfect storm
Yeah.
again. When the universe is just conspiring, I guess. But I believe all this kind of stuff happens for a reason. So I went back in. They like set up a model ski just inside for me because I was not feeling up to like going out. I wasn't feeling well, rain and cold. And I sat in it and they like adjusted it for me and they were like, and I agreed to it. I was like, okay, I'll do this. And that's when my journey began of like restarting. And it was, I mean, a lot of people instructors and staff in that organization were like, oh, you were a really good skier before, like it's gonna be easy, like whatever. And I did try to warn them, like historically I'm a stubborn person and I will do something when I put my mind to it, but it does not come easy to me, never has. Even with skiing, which I like to think I was pretty good at as a stand-up skier. I was pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, I still was. It was a work, and like school has always been like I just gotta like put my head down and like I was not the gifted kid, but I was a kid that would grind it out and figure it out. So I tried to explain that to them. I think they had high expectations, also given that I'm not paralyzed. So they're like, you're basically able-bodied, you just can't like move your joints. So I think they got disheartened before I did at how long it was taking me to learn. It took me like 25 lessons to really be able to get it
Yeah.
at all. Like, and then it was like amazing. I finally was able to get into a sit ski, not the beginner sit ski, but the one that's supposed to be harder, but it was designed to like act like the way that someone that races skis.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so intuitive to me, like just the way that it moved. And I think I got on it at just the right point. And then all of a sudden, like I went from like not getting it at all to like it just made sense. Like everything made sense. And that's when I started seeing real progress. It was after they had like some of the instructors tried to like convince me to try bi skiing, which is not mono skiing. Like it's really great for a lot of people, but it is not like the equalizer. You can't go on all the same runs.
Yeah.
You definitely can't race and be competitive. But I was like, no, no, stuck it out, got on that rig, and I immediately fell in love with it. I was like, this is what it was, and I was getting. They took me up the first blue run, which is like an intermediate run that I had been in like 2 years. um I like got halfway down it, had to like stop because I was choking up because at some point like I was doing some turns and I forgot that I was sit skiing and I just felt like I was skiing, and
Oh,
it was absolutely incredible. Yeah.
that's really neat. So have you got back to competing yet?
So last season was really huge. I That was actually last season, and then I kept grinding at it. I got COVID, so I was out literally like almost a month. I ended up dropping the semester because I was like, I can't make up a month of school. And then I lost some more mobility from being off my meds from that. But then I had 2 straight months. This was like the gift of dropping the semester of just skiing. So I skied almost every day. I was allowed to borrow a sit ski while I was at the time fundraising for my own,
Hmm.
which was a really great thing because it got rid of the financial barrier. And I skied every day. My old ski team let me join them on a spring camp. So I got back engaged for the first time, which was full circle. It was like everything I'd been working for. So excited. Got back on race skis. I'm just kind of like training and preparing. And so this season, I'm getting back to competing. Um, this winter, I'm going to like a training camp specifically for adaptive racers. And I got a scholarship to go, which is amazing. It's like
Good.
for people who really want to like get into that world and take it seriously. Um, just won an incredible competition thanks to my TikTok followers, which was literally $20,000. Never seen that much money in my entire life. And so is taking me. I finally am able to have my own equipment. I'm funding my training and stuff. So I have my sights set on the 2030 Paralympic Games, um, and that's my goal. So my goal is
Okay.
that in 2030 I will race in those games, and I might not win, but I want to be there.
Yes, I want you to be there. We'll be following along, cheering you along the way. I would love for you to come back and talk more about how this is helping your life, how it's hindering it, how you're working with it, because I think it's so important for other people to see that, yeah, we've got days and downs, but you can plow through, and just the different ways that we do that. Do you have a major picked out in school yet?
Yes.
What is it? What you
I
got?
am a film production major with an emphasis in editing and sound design.
Oh, cool.
Um, so yeah, and that has also been my love since I was at like 6. I was like, I'm gonna make movies.
So
So
are you documenting a lot of what you're doing then?
yes,
Okay.
I mean mainly I have the main thing has just been sharing my journey on TikTok, and I've been so overwhelmed with the support on there,
Mm-hmm.
and I literally would not be able to do this and afford the $10,000 cost of being able to even get on the snow because that's how much a sit ski costs, which is crazy, without them. So I've really been sharing like the small journeys there, but I'm hoping at some point to actually um, have the time to like make a proper film about the important, not really about myself, but like about how powerful adaptive sports can be
Yes.
for lots of people, not just people disabled from accidents, but people who have stuff like autoimmune diseases and stuff, because I think a lot of times they don't even know that that's an option for them,
Yeah.
and that they are eligible. If you have something like RA and you have any uh, secondary damage from it, they don't really count like health conditions, but they count any damage from health condition. So if you
Okay.
have MS and you have a lesion, that counts. And like a lot of people just don't know that. So I would just love to bring more awareness
All
to that
right.
to our
We'll be
community.
doing that. Tell people where they can go to follow you on TikTok.
Yes, so on TikTok and on Instagram, you can find me at Alexia Kate, but the A in Kate is the numeral 8.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Again, come back when you can. I love it. Appreciate what you're doing for the entire community. Keep doing
Thank
it.
you for
We'd
having
love
me.
to see you back. And be sure you're following along. You can connect, watch, and listen on whatever platform: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Runradio.net is where you can link over.